8:13 in the evening, and we'd like to start inside the Outhaus for yet another week. Very happy to welcome Sherry Bagley from AEE, all the way from the States, coming to us on a very difficult time change, but welcome. Sherry's going to tell us a little bit about the AEE and the upcoming international conference. But before she does that, I'd like to just make a few acknowledgements and a few announcements. I'd like to present an acknowledgement to the traditional owners of the country throughout Australia and recognise the continuing connection to lands, waters and communities. We pay our respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to make a special mention of the amazing Outhaus oligarchs, Sherry, David, Henry and Mads, for all their hard toil on this vital community project and making it look beautiful. Special mention to David as well, because he is the man who has really orchestrated this connection, and it's great to have this connection. Without any further ado, I will hand over to Sherry. Thanks, Sherry.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm Sherry Bagley. I'm the Executive Director of AEE. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm coming from the native lands of the Tocobaga people, and that's present-day St. Petersburg, Florida, in the United States. So it's about 3:13 in the morning here, so you can see it's a little dark. But sometimes I chose this location because I live in it's a subtropical place, and the geckos sometimes will gather on these doors and catch the bugs that come. So a little interesting background for you with the with my doors. But I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. We are gearing up for our international conference, and that's why David asked me to come on. But I'd love to tell you a little bit about AEE itself and what we do throughout the rest of the year. I have a small video, really short, our promotional video, and just to give you an idea about who we are. And I should have asked earlier if I could share, but it looks like I can. So thank you so much. I'll just share it really quickly.
Building inclusive and accessible communities start with education and communicating with others.
We believe learning through experience positively transforms people and our world.
We are AEE, the Association for Experiential Education.
Your global membership community, focusing on adventure and challenge,
social justice,
the natural world,
and creative play.
We have been dedicated to promoting, defining, developing, and applying the practices of experiential education since 1972.
Our accredited programs work with over 300,000 people annually.
And it's not just our 1,500 plus members that make AEE an amazing organization, it's also the generous volunteers that make our events possible.
AEE offers professional development,
accreditations,
community resources,
networking,
conferences,
a career center,
virtual learning, and most importantly,
connections that last a lifetime.
We are AEE. There are amazing things happening. Visit aee.org to learn more.
So that's our quick overview of who we are. A little bit more about us. Like we said, we've been around since 1972. Our roots were definitely in outdoor education, and brought about by a lot of folks who were interested in learning more about challenge courses and how to facilitate programs safely. It slowly evolved into an actual nonprofit organization with a board of directors who oversaw things. And then we got involved in accreditation. So one of the main things was to make sure that programs were safe. And so our accreditation process has been around since the 1980s. It's developed over time, and there's a program in Australia, the Outdoor Education Group is accredited through us. So a little connection there. Actually, one of the people that works there and different places is on our accreditation council. So we also started certifications. So adventure therapy is one of our big branches in our tree, and we've started adventure therapy certification. So that's a new thing for us, and we're advancing that and seeing how that goes. And another thing that we do is our virtual learning. So we've been working on that, especially throughout the pandemic, to try to make sure we're providing webinars and resources and all kinds of things. So any questions about who AEE is or what we do? Happy to answer anything while we're going through, since it's such a small group.
I'll jump in. You mentioned the Outdoor Education Group, and almost half the room here have actually worked for them at some point. They're a very big organization. Does AEE accreditation for a smaller outdoor centre provider or a school, would that actually work in an Australian context, given you're an American organisation, but you have an international, global sort of reach and perspective?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I think so. We have programs accredited in Singapore and Hong Kong and India. So we've really worked hard to make sure our accreditation council has people from all over the world, so we can incorporate, if we need to incorporate some kind of standard for that area. The standards are very, they're very broad, but they cover a lot of different topics. So accreditation is not necessarily about telling you exactly what to do. It's making sure you're doing the right thing to meet that standard. So there is a lot of ways you can meet the same standard. And the Accreditation Council has a really extensive process for reviewing it. So initially there's a self-assessment, and that's a pretty long process, about a year. It usually takes people to do the self-assessment, because you're really looking at every aspect of your program. So who drives your vans? Who makes sure your equipment is still in compliance? Where does your insurance come from? All kinds of things. And you look at each one of those. It goes into experiential education and your facilitation. It goes into equity in hiring. It goes into how you're training your staff. So really extensive. And then after that process, and once you've completed the self-assessment with your accreditation liaison, we have members of the Accreditation Council actually go to the site and do a pretty extensive site review. So they want to make sure that they see all your programs run. They want to make sure they see, they talk to your staff, they talk to some of your participants. And then every year it's not as extensive of a self-assessment, but you go through and you make sure you're still meeting all the standards. If anything has changed, and your accreditation liaison takes a look at that. So it's pretty adaptable for all different kinds of programs. I worked for Pathfinder Outdoor Education here in Florida for many years, and did our accreditation for AEE before so I'm pretty familiar with it from the side of, being a participant in the accreditation program. And I think it's really important because of that, openness. The Accreditation Council has really set things up so that you can meet those standards in so many different ways.
Sorry, Doug, that's accreditation of at an organisation level and for programs. Do you also have accreditation for instructors, or is it just at the organisation level?
It's just at the organization level. Mm-hmm.
Okay. There's a bit of talk going on in Australia right across the board about different, types of accreditation programs and what is required or good practice / best practice, that sort of thing at the moment. So that's hence the interest.
Yeah, I think when so the Accreditation Council and our accreditation and director, Steve Pace, he's been working with the certification for the adventure therapist. So that was about a 5-year process to get that in. And so that's kind of a not really a test, but we're looking at that to see if we can certify individuals as like a facilitator, not necessarily for high ropes, but for experiential education, for outdoor programs, kind of a broader sense. That would be a 5 to 10 year goal for us. And then somebody could present, I'm certified by AEE. I have my diversity, equity, inclusion certificate. I have my WOFR. I have this, all the different things to make them a well-rounded facilitator. But currently, no, just organizations.
Okay, thanks.
It would seem, at least from an organizational perspective, that having an independent body of the statute of AEE would definitely be a valuable accreditation to have, and it would seem to, as an organization, perhaps in terms of your standing within the wider sector, perhaps make you look better to potential clients and other people who are seeking your services. Just a comment.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the things, I always felt when I worked at a program that was accredited, it always felt really good when I had to talk to parents who were concerned about their child coming. I could say, we're accredited by a global organization. We have a review every year, and that was always a plus, of course. Plus just the knowledge of knowing your program so well, and that you're covering all of the bases, that you're making sure everything is safe. It's just, yeah, I think it's definitely a plus for peace of mind too.
So Sherry, then I guess extrapolating from Pete's comment, given you're American based or North American based, how do foreign organizations such as OEG or Singapore based schools and programs, how do they get their parents or their stakeholders to buy into an accreditation that's run by a company in another country? And because obviously the reputation of the AEE is quite strong in the States within the experiential education field. But if I asked a bunch of group leaders or instructors here in Australia, nobody would know who you are.
Yeah, and I think that's a branding and a marketing problem for AEE itself too, because over the years, our accreditation program hasn't been that big. We've been doing this since the 80s. We have 62 programs worldwide. So obviously there's hundreds of programs even in the States that we could be doing. And I think I agree, we're not doing the best job we could of making sure we're promoting AEE, everywhere in our accreditation. That's just, we've been too small. And I think we haven't been able to, even though I firmly believe in our program, and I think it's very sound and very well executed. We just haven't had the capacity to let everybody know about it. It's also a pretty extensive process, so I think sometimes that discourages folks from actually going through the whole process. People have to see the value in it, and again, I think that's a marketing point of AEE. AEE's always been a nonprofit. We've always, people it's run by all volunteers except for our one part-time staff that directs the accreditation. So I just think we need to let people know about it more, and that's definitely one of the things we could work on.
I'm going to bring a couple of the other people who are in the room who are lurking. Brendan works for a university, and Stephen works or is a PhD candidate. Is AEE accreditation relevant for a university environment?
We do have accreditation. We do have university programs accredited, so not like a whole university, but like Brown University has their outdoor leadership training program accredited through AEE. So we have a couple different outdoor education. So we have an outdoor education accreditation and a therapeutic adventure accreditation. So depending on what your program is, it would fit under either one of those standards probably.
So if you don't mind me jumping in, Sherry, hi, I'm Steve.
Hi.
I've got a really keen interest in safety, wilderness, that type of thing in general. And one of the issues is trying to sell. So you're saying you've got these barriers to marketing. How do we get that over the line, and how can that translate into safety in general and wilderness education programs?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Steve. I think as we continue to expand globally, and just as we continue to network like this and and talk more and let people know more about these programs, you know, there are different programs throughout the world that do accreditation. I think I'm a big proponent of AEE isn't the only one out there. Like, I think we should all work together to figure out how to make it safer. So I think continuing conversations, I think I think it does have to do with marketing, and we have to educate our participants and our students and things like that on what makes a program safe, how accreditation is important. And I think we have to, you know, get the support of, it'd be great if accredited programs got a discount on insurance, things like that would be helpful. And so it's just working toward those goals continuously.
Maybe we'll pivot now and maybe give us a bit of an outline of the upcoming international conference. Disclaimer, I'm going as a paid participant for my third conference. I was first there in 2009, having a gap year from Australian outdoor ed, and traveled over to Montreal, of all places, to be a part of it. Pete's been to a live conference as well, and I was in the virtual space last year. I think 2 out of the 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. sessions I managed to get into before I crashed and burned. But yeah, let's hear what's in store for this year.
Certainly, yeah. We're again virtual, so we made that decision based on not only safety, but also the fact that we really expanded our global audience last year, and we're able to expand accessibility for everyone. Really, we had a really great turnout. We had over 700 folks sign up, and so we wanted to be able to keep that kind of momentum going and keep that accessibility going. We kept our pricing down too, because we understood that there were a lot of issues last year, a lot of economic issues, a lot of programs were closed, and we just wanted to make sure we were providing our content to people. That was really our main driver last year. So it was successful. It kind of stumbled through it. You know, we made that pivot really quickly. I'd never done a virtual conference before. We were lucky that a friend of AEE had a conference platform that we utilized. And so we made it work, and our workshop presenters did an amazing job pivoting also. So, you know, from last year to this year, a lot has changed in the virtual realm, and we've learned a lot. We're going to have over 70 workshops. They'll all be recorded again. So even though they might be at times that are not necessarily friendly to everyone, all the content will be available through December 31st. So you'll have over a month to watch everything. We will be having our Kurt Han Marina Ewald addressee, Dr. Yap-Min Shum. He's coming from Singapore he's virtually from Singapore to speak to us. And we're also having a lot more networking opportunities in store this year. We're really working on making sure people have that space to kind of have casual conversations, to talk about things that they want to talk about, rather than, you know, just having the workshop or the keynote and then we're done. So after every workshop session, after every keynote session, there'll be space in gather.town, which is a virtual video platform, a little like a video game in that you can move around. So we have like a conference space, and you have a little avatar and you move around, and as you get closer to people, you can hear their conversations, and you move away, their faces go away, and their conversation goes away. But we're facilitating those a little bit more this year, and making sure people have the chance to just talk to each other. We also have more space between things, so people can take a break from their screen. That was one of the comments from last year, is we tried to kind of keep the same schedule as we have in the past. So we've extended it to 4 days instead of just 3, a little more open space, a little more time between things so people can, you know, run around, let their dog out, whatever it is they need to do. But still really amazing content. Our Activate speakers are coming to us from all over the world. If you've never seen that part of our conference, it's really special to AEE in that we have storytelling. So people come in and they work with coaches for several months and they hone a story, a 7-minute story. And so we have 6 of those as our opening, and it's always very powerful to listen to somebody's story and really feel that connection. So other things that are happening, we have a Connection Expo, which is a kind of a marketplace where we have people, if people are looking for jobs, if people want products, if people want other nonprofits to know about. We have a lot of things happening in that. And then we'll also have we're going to have awards again this year. So we'll have an awards celebration, trying to do some just fun, random things in there too. So a lot of content. It's all the workshops are from all different sectors, and I think that's one of the things that really makes AEE special is that even if you're an outdoor educator, you might end up in an adventure therapy session that really teaches you about brain science, that you can take those pieces back. If you're a classroom teacher, you might learn about, about taking your kids outside, to learn about nature and have those nature breaks. So one of the things is the cross-sector, cross-professional things that you learn that you might not have learned just from being at an outdoor education conference.
If you're facilitating an online forum like inside the Outhaus, you might actually learn a whole lot about how to facilitate an amazing virtual conference.
Sherry, can I ask about GatherTown? I had a go last year and it was really quite engaging and addictive. Are you going to have certain areas? You said you're going to have it more facilitated this year. Could I pitch a Australasian room where people could gather from Australia and Greater Asia and make connections? Because again, people in the room here have multiple connections across Southeast Asia, but we because of our government's current stance, we can't really leave. We can leave the country, but we can't get back without quarantining at the moment. It's starting to relax, but it's going to be Christmas before it happens. But in the virtual realm, is that something that you're looking at doing with that space?
Yeah, David, I would love that. Email me. We'll set up. We can have that space available for you. If you want to be in there, if other, we can advertise it. It'd be awesome. It'd be great.
Might just have to make that a coffee theme, depending on the time change. It'll have to be wherever the coffee is. That's where you'll find the Australians, I think, at that time of day, like yourself.
And the great thing about the Gather.town is it's open 24 hours. So whenever works, if you want to do a specific time, you can do that. If you just wander in there, sometimes people are in there. But there are separate rooms, so we could have one, labeled, this is for the Australians. And we could have a coffee station in there. You could virtually drink your coffee. I think you could even put like a little coffee mug with your avatar. So you could definitely have that.
What would, given we're doing it all virtually this year, and again, the engagement, the idea of having that continuation of engagement you found last year with a global audience, do you foresee that potentially you might continue the conference in some form virtually, not completely, in 2023? I'm not trying to get a scoop here, but if we can get an indication, I would love to come back to the States and come to the conference again. It sort of works for our schooling. A lot of our schools start to wind down in November, less camps because it's hotter. So it's a great time to visit North America and see the change of colors over there and visit friends and family if you've got it. But is that something you're thinking about or from the AEE?
Yeah, definitely. So 2022 will be our 50th anniversary conference, which is pretty exciting for us. And so we have some special things planned for that. And it will be in person as of now, but we will have a hybrid component. I don't think we'll ever go back to just straight in-person conferences, just due to due to the nature of not just our conference, but conferences all over. That's definitely how the industry is leaning toward. There are ways that you can make a hybrid event that works for all different people. And since accessibility, inclusivity are so important to AE, we want to make sure we continue that. We want to make sure that that people that are coming from the Philippines can afford to get to the conference in whatever way that is. If that's in the virtual realm or in the in-person realm, we want to make sure we're doing everything we can to get our audience the content that they want and need.
Would it be safe to say that there might be a return to the, I know for a couple of years you've tried to have an Asia Pacific or an Asian version of the conference, and there is for those who are new to AEE in the room, there's an international affiliated group that is sometimes full of Australians, but usually Canadians and various other international folks from Asia. Could you speak to that, Sherry, if you've got any plans, even if it's a long way off?
Yeah, we had a partnership with ISF School in Hong Kong. One of our board members teaches there, and so he had really pushed for an Asia Pacific conference, and that was supposed to happen in February of 2021. And so obviously it didn't. And so we're still working, we're still in contact, we're still trying to make it happen. That the school has been so busy and just trying to pivot and get back to its programs that we haven't been able to set dates. But if anyone has thoughts about that, we're definitely open to doing more like regional conferences in different regions of the globe. So right now, AE has North American regions. So it involves Canada, the United States, and Mexico. And those regions have regional conferences in our spring. So February, March, April. And they're smaller conferences, usually around 100 people. And they're all volunteer run. So it really just depends on who is doing it and what the capacity is. AE supports in the way that we promote, we have marketing, we provide supplies, we sign contracts, things like that. But it's really volunteers who make those happen. And so we would support, if we wanted to have an AE conference in Australia, we would support that and help with whatever you needed there. And I would love to come, so it'd be great. But we are continuing to work for the Asia Pacific Conference. It's just finding a venue and the local people to support those kind of events.
Well, I'll ask another one since I've got all the questions today. How do you see, from a conference that's so collaborative and so in the cloud, how do you see the conversations evolving or continuing after the conference, after those conference dates of 4 days, outside of bleary eyes and lots of coffee intake for us in the Southern Hemisphere? How do those conversations continue? Are you guys thinking about that in terms of a platform or more Zoom sessions, or do you have any ideas, or has it not occurred to anyone? Because we're about starting conversations here in the Outhaus, but also checking back in 6 months down the line about where's the conversation occurred to, where's it moved to, does it need more resources and more attention? So just wondering.
Yeah, that's a great point. What we've been doing to kind of help our members stay connected throughout the time, we do a roundtable every month. So that's an open Zoom call. And we've been facilitating those since the pandemic began. So anybody can jump on and ask questions. It's everybody. So people who have been working in the industry for 20 years, to people who've been working for 2 years, to people who do circus performing arts as experiential education, to, high ropes course facilitators. So it's variable, and it's been a really great way to stay connected. We've also been having virtual facilitation play spaces, so people can sign up to practice their virtual facilitation skills and just have a bunch of people who can give them feedback. So we have a process in that where you get feedback on your activity and what you could do better, or it's just an opportunity to fail without it being with a client. And so that's been a great way to stay connected and have fun. I think as a targeted, like what will we do to keep those conversations going? We're really looking to expand those regions that we have right now, because we are very North American centric. It's just the way it's been, because I think we haven't had I think the pandemic has given us the opportunity for outdoor educators to see how virtual can actually work for us, or it can actually help, and actually expand things. And so we're working on those regional, global regions. If you sign up for the conference, you'll be asked like what global region you're in, and we're trying to gather a list of those folks so we can start some of these global region groups and continue the conversations and do some of those regional conferences. We are pretty small still, with 2.5 employees, so it's really about volunteers that keeps us running and keeps us going. I tend to try to want to do everything, and I know I can't, but any help or support, anything you all need would be great to know. If there's something that you are looking for, some kind of support or networking that you need, I know you have a great thing going here, but if there's anything AEE can help you with, let me know.
I'll just make a comment there. And I don't know whether it's clear to the Australian audience, but I think the big advantage that I learned in a previous conversation before we started the session with Sherry and Dave was that the virtual conference this year is going to take on a Zoom format similar to Inside the Outhaus here, rather than a webinar format. And I think that format is much more conducive in an online forum, although it's obviously not as good as a face-to-face forum, but I think it's a better online forum for folks to actually interact and converse with each other, rather than a webinar format where you feel like you're just in a lecture room and unable to put input in.
So, hello everyone. Sorry, I have a virtual background on. I'm also cutting fruit for my little boy and getting him showered and that sort of stuff. So I do apologise if I looked a little bit absent at times. But Sherry, thanks so much so far for listening in, and I'll be an attendee there. Just to add to Pete's comments, we recently had our national precursor event for our outdoor education conference that was meant to happen last year and meant to happen this year. And I would agree, the notion that being in a more interactive framework, if it's going to be that, will be much better, because I found that one rather, while great, frustrating in many ways, because I knew there was these other people out there, Dom or Steve or Dave, and I couldn't contact them or chat to them. And, and if you were on a different platform. So, that is one of the wonderful things about our profession, is that you do want to engage, not just listening to the person that's talking, but have conversations around that. So I'm also interested to see what this, the virtual world will be, and seeing Dave in there at all hours of the night with his coffee will be interesting as well. But Sherry, I guess I'm also interested how you've been able to, this is a little bit off topic, and but previously in a different life, I was also looking after an outdoor education association called the VOEA, which was at one stage the Victorian Outdoor Ed Association, which was at one stage one of the largest in the world. How have you sustained the AEE to sort of maintain its sort of balance and its membership? Dom, you would be able to say, like, membership is always a difficult thing, getting people to part with their money. What are the kind of tenets that's really made that possible? I'm surprised that you say that there's only 2.5 of you, so to speak, for such a large organisation. What's been the resonating thing? What's really sort of made that sort of come to fruition or stay? Sorry, lots in that, but yeah.
No, that's a good, no problem. So one of the things we always hear, and one of the things that I know personally, is that people feel a connection with the community of AEE. When people go to the conferences, when people attend an event, what they say is, I found my people. they're just like, it's just what people say. And we know that's not everyone. And we're trying to make sure that we're being welcoming to people who look different than what we usually see. But I think there's a really strong sense of the importance of this community, and that's been able to stay in AEE for 50 years. That need for the research. So we have a strong research community. We do produce a journal, an academic journal. So the research is important. The accreditation is important. The need to make sure that everyone is doing the best they can. I think, propelling forward that notion that we as educators can also always be learning. I think it's really connected people. We've definitely had our ups and downs over the years as a nonprofit. And I think just that sense of community really, really drives us forward. Right now, we're at about 1,700 members, which is large, I feel like. And we're working to expand that, but it is complicated because AEE is not just for outdoor educators. We're for teachers. We're for therapists, and so there are other places people can go. But I think, again, that thing about AEE that's so important is that we cross over all the different boundaries of professions and keep those experiential education principles at our core, and we can all learn from each other. And so that's really been, I think, the driving force behind keeping us going. And amazing volunteers. We have some really, really dedicated volunteers who have been working with this organization since the beginning. I mean, some of our founding board members are still around and still, they'll call me every now and then, and that's great. So I think people just feel really dedicated to the organization itself. And my job is to keep that integrity and that sense of community going, and expanding it to include more people. Which, with social media and kind of that virtual format, it's been great to be able to reach out to folks that we haven't had before. I don't know if that completely answered your question.
No, it does. I guess, yeah, it's a battle that we have, in Australia to maintain our organisations and our associations, and but no, it's all credit to you. And I guess also, the journal is such a wonderful journal. It's sort of, I direct my students to it all the time, and primarily because of its breadth. It's not just dealing with outdoor education, but that notion that we can draw from a number of areas in terms of experiential ed. So thanks, Sherry.
Yeah, thank you.
Sherry, I've got a little bit of a follow-up from that one. I'm the Executive Officer of Outdoors Queensland, but I'm also the President of the Outdoor Council of Australia, which is like an umbrella group across all the different state organisations. So, and we have it's a little bit unusual, I don't know, the way it seems to work is we have quite relatively well-resourced state peak bodies, but at a national level, it's been really difficult in Australia for a long time as far as getting getting resourcing at the national level to actually, I guess, advocate for outdoor activities in general. And again, this isn't just outdoor education, it's outdoor activities right across the spectrum. And yeah, it's an interesting thing. I wondered if that's a similar situation in the States, that AEE sees that in this, having that many members are ways that you can keep up with having that many members. We're flat out we've got 150 odd members, but we've also had quite a bit. I think there's been a larger focus because of COVID and the work that we did over the last 18 months to help outdoor operators right across the board. And that happened at the national level and at the state level. But I guess the question is that a similar sort of pattern in the States as far as the federal sort of ability to get funding at that federal level compared to the States?
I think so. AEE right now, we're pretty lucky in that we don't have any grants or we don't have any federal funding. Right now, we're a membership dues. So a third of our budget is membership dues, a third is the conference, and a third is accreditations. Basically, how it breaks down. And so when I came on board 2 years ago, we didn't have any grants and we didn't have any funding. I know for a lot of nonprofits here in the States, it's been an issue, definitely. And I think what we're seeing too, not just in AE, but in the States with volunteer organizations, is a lot of fatigue right now. People are so done with just, living with the pandemic and the trauma of it. People are having trouble, getting through their daily lives. So volunteering and being part of something else is a lot. And I think there has to be some understanding of that. But also I think keeping the value of volunteering and being part of an organization present, like that's something that's really hard. We have a great social media marketing person, Anna Miano, and she posts constantly, and that's really, you have to be in the forefront of people's minds, and you have to keep reminding people why you're important or why you're necessary or why you're needed. And that's, not always the easiest thing to do. But funding, we're lucky in that funding for us does not come from federal dollars.
Yeah. I think I listened to Seth Godin's podcast, and he talks about if you keep making an important enough, even if it's a very small contribution, you keep making those contributions over time, it makes it almost impossible for people to forget how important you are and the connection that you give. And I think it very much applies to what you guys do. And I think, it's similar to what happens here and also our organisation. I think that's the thing, keeping on making that difference, even if it's a small difference to everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that we were very excited to get Sherry in the room, and I posted, almost to the point where I was spamming different Facebook groups to try and get a lot of attention on this for an Australian audience to come in. And we've just cracked 8 people today, and 3 of those are Outhaus oligarchs and everyone else is a regular, but we do appreciate that. If there's not any other more burning questions that people want to ask of Sherry, it is 5 minutes to 4 a.m. her time in Florida. I don't want to keep her up too much longer, but I'd love to give Sherry a pitch on what the current pricing are, when prices will go up, and like an elevator pitch in 3 minutes. I know we'll probably cover that, but just give the folks here, because we get a lot of views on our videos afterwards. So a lot of people will watch this, and we can cut down and edit bits into a nice little pitch.
Great. Thank you so much, David. I've seen you've been putting our website and everything in the chat, so I appreciate that. For the conference runs November 11th through the 14th. Pricing will go up on November 1st. We have a tiered pricing this year, like we did last year. So it's kind of choose your own what you can pay. There's a set. There's 3 set prices. It starts at $80 right now. So if that's what you can pay, great. And there's 2 other tiers that go up. So it just depends on where you're at personally. Again, any extra over 80 goes to our scholarships and goes to help promote other programs. So that's our pricing right now. And that gives you access. Again, you'll have access to everything, no matter what pricing you pay, and to the recordings until January 1st. And then same thing, we've kind of done the same thing with AE membership. So our AE membership is tiered the same way, same benefits, no matter what you can pay, because we want to make sure we're being accessible to folks. And also there's people that can pay a little bit more and help other people out. So for our membership, for an individual, it starts at $75. And that gets you lots of benefits too. You get job postings. You can on our career board. There's partnerships with several outdoor gear companies. Playmeo, which is Mark Collard there in Australia. He gives a discount if you're an AE member. And there's several other organizations. Kakori, which is an app that is being developed by AE members, and it has all kinds of great initiatives on it, and you can pull up what you need. So we have a lot of different benefits, and those can all be found on our website.
Great. Thanks very much. That was a really good elevator pitch, and I think it's given everybody, and it's about, I think I worked out really quickly, it's about $108 Australian dollars at the moment on the current exchange rate for the conference, which isn't bad given it's 4 days of conference proceedings if you're live, and then watching it for a month or so afterwards, and the connections. So does anyone else have any other questions or any other things they'd like to ask to Sherry? Again, it's very exciting. We've got such a big influencer within our community and in the States to be in the room today.
Well, I had a philosophical question, but you sent Sherry down the elevator pitch road. Now I feel like she needs to leave the room, and I can't ask my philosophical question.
It's not how it works, you know that, Pete.
Feel free.
My question was, I guess, having lived in the States for a number of years, about 12 in total, do you think that, and I'll throw this to the room, do you think that the culture of volunteerism and volunteerism is perhaps, people see it as more important than perhaps in other parts of the world, and this leads into the success of AEE at a national level?
That's an interesting philosophical question, definitely. I would say that volunteerism in the United States is promoted. It's not expected, but it is, I think it's part of culturally, it's taught in a lot of schools, it's taught in a lot of churches, it's taught, this is what you do for your community. You volunteer and you do something that's meaningful to you. I'm not sure, because I haven't lived in Australia, or I've lived in the Marshall Islands for a while, but other than that, I haven't gotten to experience how volunteerism works in other parts of the world. But I do know that there was a rise in volunteerism during the pandemic. I think people had more time. I think people were looking for things to do. And I think that there were a lot of causes that came up during the last 2 years that people really felt passionate about. And I think hopefully that will continue.
I think volunteering is changing, definitely in Australia. Like there seems to be trends towards people not necessarily wanting to volunteer in the same role 52 weeks a year, where people are looking to volunteer as part of an event, or as those sort of more sporadic sort of activities, rather than necessarily taking on a board role or that sort of thing. And that's actually challenging, I think, for a lot of organisations on how can you give a volunteer who's only has a limited amount of time a meaningful experience, but also allow them to contribute to that community and have that sense of contribution. And I think that's the piece that organisations are probably grappling with a little bit. The sports organisations are very much trying to deal with that. I know quite a few sports clubs trying to understand, well, can we change the way we do things to have a different person as the grounds marshal every week or whatever. And that's the same thing for event organisers in the outdoor space that seem to be getting to that you don't have to have the same person doing the same job at every single event. But yeah, I think there's change, Pete, and I think it's an interesting thing as far as that side of things, and something we need to get on top of.
What do other people in the room think of this philosophical question?
Look, I think, and this is going back, Pete, to when I was looking after the VOEA and elsewhere, I think we have come to a crossroads in Australian society where we're probably less likely to volunteer in a number of places. The time, I think we feel like we're a busier society, so we have less time to give in many ways. Whether we are or not, I'm not too sure. I can remember the hours my mum spent driving me around, but I think there's a generational shift in from when our parents, like as an example, where our parents drove us everywhere to sport and everything, and we're involved in coaching and on all those levels. And I think as probably the cohort of people that I've now in that age bracket of and a bit younger than me, we kind of are a little bit more focused on ourselves in some respects and less likely to give externally and less likely to be involved in the Saturday activities. And hence the money willing to pay for something, but probably less likely to give something. So, you know, I think that's the reality. And I think we see it at conferences, we see it at organising communities, and we see it in many facets. That going to Sherry's comment, like she had those people that who started the AEE, who still ring her now, you know, 40 years of experience, and I know my own personal experience with the VOEA, you know, those people that were invested in it for a long period of time were you know, rusted on, so to speak, but I don't think we rust on anymore. We're pretty quick to drop something if it's not applied to us. So that's the same with volunteering.
I've been a pretty active volunteer for the State Emergency Services for about 7 years. And I think you're right. I think what's happening now, it's more about me rather than about what I can give. It's about what I can take. And I think the other issue is learning how to deal with spontaneous volunteers that are here for a good time and not for a long time. That's my experience.
I think as a separate thing, if you looked at any bushfire, regional bushfire association in Queensland or Australia for that matter, I know I've been to a number of bushfires in the past, and Steve, you might see this, but I remember a big bushfire where my parents' property was gone and the people jumping off the fire truck were 70 plus. There wasn't many young people floating around pulling a hose and putting things out. So I think you're right, Steve. It's changed, and lots of reasons: the requirements, the necessity to meet so many more things versus just rocking up and giving a hand, meeting blue card and meeting a whole heap of other things and concerns about that. They don't want to be liable for things. They don't want to be caught out by accident. So the conversation's gone in quite a different pathway, but anyway.
And I'll come back to that too. I'm very active in search and rescue. That's my cup of tea, and I know that my time is coming. And I often wonder, where are those 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds who are going to pick up the chain? Because we don't need fat 50 and 60-year-olds. We need fit 20 and 30-year-olds at the front of the search operation.
I'm aware of people's time being valuable. I just want one more question back for Sherry. How's it looking in the States, since you're actually there and we're not, in terms of outdoor ed and camps coming back? I know there was just a recent summer camp season. And sort of the last couple of things, what you're hearing from members about how their programs are coming back in a almost post-COVID era.
Good and bad. I think we've definitely seen some programs who have had to close. You know, heard about camps that had to close. Heard about a couple of our therapeutic programs have had to close. But we've also seen people, you know, running a successful year, some summer of camp. A lot of our university programs are coming back with their freshman orientation and their outdoor adventure. And in the States, and I think this is true worldwide, people have become way more interested in outdoor activities. You know, sales of bikes and boats and RVs and everything skyrocketed here in the United States during the pandemic. And so people are interested in being outdoors. Hopefully, we're hoping that translates into them sending their kids to camps and to programs. But it's coming back slowly. It looks a little different. I think state to state we have different restrictions. So it's very dependent on what state you live in, and but it's feeling more positive. And our accreditation site review teams just started to go back out to look at sites. So they've been on pause because so many programs were closed and because of restrictions and travel, but they've just started to go back out and they're seeing programs, you know, running, and they're seeing good things happening. So I think, you know, as long as nothing changes, we're getting back to, I'm not going to say normal, but the new normal. And what that looks like, and just trying to figure out how we can keep people interested in programs and interested in doing what we have to offer. Thanks so much for having me. It was great talking with you all. And feel free to go to our website. My email is on there. You can email me with any questions. If you have thoughts about how we can support Australia or Asia Pacific, let me know. I'm happy to have discussions with people about great ideas. I'm always excited to talk about how we can expand experiential education globally. And it's just exciting to hear what people are doing in other places in the world. So thank you again.
Hey, Sherry, just before we finish the recording and finish the Outhaus for the evening, I, for one, on behalf of the Outhaus team and the Australian audience and New Zealand and South African audience who will listen to this worldwide later, would just like to thank you for an amazing presentation, both on the virtual conference and AEE, and answering all my philosophical questions and getting up early in the morning. I, for one, have a vision that inside the Outhaus, when it becomes a real adult, will become like the AEE in Australia. Anyway, thanks again, and hopefully you will greet the day of sunshine and tropics in the Florida area.
Yep, definitely. Thank you.
Go to the conference, people. Go to the conference.